Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of Cocoa in the Sun podcast. I am your host, Malika Critchlow. Happy to be here today with you. What do I have? Okay, so I wasn't sure I was going to do a podcast today. But there was information that I learned since we last chatted. I was really excited to share with you because I have been experimenting with it and I have found it to work for me. So I don't know. I just wanted to share it with you. So, but anyway, I hope everybody's doing well. You had a great weekend. Are you guys learning more about yourself or understanding more, have different perspectives than you had before? Are you feeling more connected? Like I'm feeling. I have moments like when I feel insanely connected to Earth or really grateful for the experience and all the beauty I'm allowed to um engage with. And it's when I'm up, right? It's no longer like just in my sleep wake time. Like I was going to the park on Monday, driving to the park and trees and the leaves and the sky, and was like just on the drive to the park was like just overwhelmed with love and so happy to be a part of it all. So I've been getting a lot of feeling like that a lot more often when I'm up. It doesn't last a long time. That blissful, connected feeling, but generally my disposition is very calm, peaceful, hopeful, secure. I don't know how to describe it. A really nice place. Very, very, very balanced place, I think, considering all that is happening externally for my life and the world. So anyway, okay, so let me start with what the method was. So I remember being somewhat disappointed that I couldn't do the dream interpretation workshop or class, right? Course, which was $4,900. And then also I was a little bit disappointed I could never do like the Antarctica class, which was $2,500. Just up until now. I don't think this will always be my situation. And then I had made peace with it and was like, you know, what I need will come to me in the best way. And those courses are great, but maybe it's not part of my journey, right? But they give so much free information anyway that's helpful, that helps me along my journey anyway. And plus my own journey and my own understandings, my own connection with my divine aspect. So what I was concerned about, why I wanted the course was I wanted to understand more about what my divine aspects were saying. I wanted to understand the dreams more. I wanted to connect with them more. Hear what they are saying more, the guidance more, so I can get into a place in life where I feel more fulfilled and whole and joy-filled and laughter and love and compassion and all the beautiful aspects of life. And I felt like I was getting the information, but it was up and down, really random. And I didn't know when it was going to happen, if it would happen. I would have some dreams and stuff like that, but I didn't feel like I had access to it as when I wanted. And you hear people saying, just ask and you'll get answers. And you do get answers, but I would get answers not right away. I didn't have that connection. And then I was unsure if I would understand what the answers were, understand what the dreams meant. I think I was, because I feel like the dreams most times would tell me what it meant or give me a resource that will help me understand it, right? But I wanted to have that connection more and more. And I was like, I thought those courses would help, but I understood that it probably was in my route, and what was for me would be for me. And I'm probably learning something in this process, right? So anyway, had just made peace with it and was content with that. And I was like, well, you know, whatever, it was for me. I'm not worried about my journey. I don't feel like my journey is going to occur regardless. And it's going to be beautiful for me. Whatever it is I picked it. So, or my soul did. So it's gonna be good for me. Probably something I enjoy more. Anyways, was on YouTube, and this YouTube video came up by a lady called Sara Landon, SaraLandon. And the YouTube video is like an hour long, and it's titled how to be guided by your soul or soul guidance, which is really what I want. I want to hear the guide. I want to know what's the guidance. And in a stronger way, I feel like I was getting it. I'm getting it more and more. I was like, I wanted to learn how to hear it more. And the video explains it. And she also talks about her book, which I bought on Audible, because I have Audible. So I have the credits. So you know, it's fine to do that. And it's called, I forget what it's called. It's by Sara Landon. I Am a Channel, or How to Channel, something like that. Anyway, in the video, God bless this woman. She breaks down how to connect with your guidance, with your divine aspects. And I really like how she explains things, because she was like, you can call it your soul, you can call it your angels, your guides. She says, whatever you want to call it. She doesn't want to, you know, some people say God. She doesn't, whatever you want to call it, right? But to get that guidance. And what I found out was from her story, she was talking about, she did QHHT, which connected her with that aspect of her being. Her guidance comes from something called the council, which is a collective, which is the same. I didn't have nothing, it wasn't called the council, but the aspect of my consciousness that I was talking to was, they said it was a collective. It's neither male nor female. And I remember the hypnotist asking me what was the name of the, like in the, when I was under, what's the name of it? And I had, but I was talking with the subconscious. They was talking, it said, wow, we've never had to name ourselves before. We've never thought about it. And they settled on the name Thera, Thera. So that's the collective of guys, angels, whatever you want to call it, soul aspect that I think helped me when I ask questions, and help me find solutions in new ways. Anyway, I really connected with that because I had the QHHT done too. She did several sessions of it. Anyway, so she described how she ended up learning how to connect with them outside of the QHHT. And she said, anybody can do it. Everybody is a channel. It's just that we have, which is the same thing Michael Sheridan had said, we all have the ability to access this guidance from our, I call it the divine aspects. I call them my guides and angels as well. I also call it my soul. I also call it God. I don't have a hat, but any of those words. So he had also said that we all have access to this, and it's what she's saying. We all have access to it. And I'm going to tell you how to access it so they can lead you to the best situations for you, which is also what he had said, that you may want to do something, but they'll show you like the best way for you to achieve what you're trying to achieve or get what you're trying to get or go where you're trying to go. And if it's not for you, they'll let you know this probably isn't going to be something you'd enjoy. You know what I mean? So she had said, yeah, you can get guidance like that. And she explained how you can experience it the different ways, and which is very similar to the ways he was talking about, and how it actually unfolds other gifts and other forms of communication for you. Anyway, so the video was really cool. I'm going to show you the video that she had. I'm still listening to the book, so I know the audiobook is going to have more information, so I haven't completed the audiobook, but I did do one of the exercises that she said on how to connect and get guidance. I've been doing it like every night since, it's been about 3 nights, and I feel connected, and I do feel feeling guidance more clearly. And it's kind of like how she described it would be, because she says once you connect with it, you will like, it's like you can hear it in your mind, like your thoughts, but they don't speak like your thoughts usually speak, like how your mind or your ego usually thinks things through. And you will think that your mind is making this up or imagining it. But when you think about it, your mind usually doesn't imagine things that way. It usually imagines things in a more fearful way. And this isn't usually fearful. Okay, so that's what she said. She said to get to a quiet place, close your eyes, and take deep breaths. She recommends at least 3, but it could be as many as you need to take. Deep, slow breaths. Quiet place, close eyes. Then she gives a visualization of stepping into your heart. She just stares down into your heart. And once you get there, she tells you to think about things that you love. So it could be people, could be places, could be food, could be experiences, books, movies, clothes. It could be any. Just think of things, anything that you love, as many things as you can that you love. Be a pet, your children, flowers, vegetables, planting, dishes. Food plays a big part for me and my daughter and my pet. Family members that I absolutely adore, friends. Anyway, she says to do this, and then when you feel in a really good, loving place, a calm place, ask your question. Or yeah, ask a question. You can ask it loud, you can ask it in your mind. I've experienced. And there's a response to it. There always is a response to it. And sometimes the response won't be a yes or no response. Sometimes it'll be, well, how do you feel about it? Is this something you want to try? Then you should try it. Or sometimes it'll be, we understand that you feel this way. This is the situation now. It's not going to be a situation for, I don't know, it could be anything. This is the type of response that I was getting. And it gave me a lot of clarification. And then she said you can go a step further and you can ask to speak to other beings of light you feel connected to, other beings of love you feel connected to. So she said you can ask to talk to Jesus or me, whoever. It doesn't, an angel, a specific angel, a family member. And what you will connect is to, she calls it their higher consciousness, and you'll be able, it could be even people that you know now that's alive. If you have an issue with someone, you want to try to better understand what's going on, you can speak to their higher consciousness, and you'll get a response. I haven't tried that yet. But I think that would help with like forgiveness and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that the human form is there yet, but the higher consciousness can give you a higher perspective of what's going on sometimes and with your higher consciousness. So I haven't tried that yet, but I did speak, I think, felt very much so with my high aspect, my divine aspect. I asked to speak with Jesus, and the conversation was, his thoughts. And it's very different thoughts from your own thoughts. I was able to, the language that they speak in is different to your language, how you speak as this personality. And you do wonder if it's your imagination. Like if you're writing a book and you're doing how the different people in the book talk, you wonder if it's that. And she said you would. That's normal till you trust it more, but to trust it, and that actually builds a connection more. And so yeah, I spoke to my guides and angels for a while. They gave me some clarification on what's going on in my life right now and why that's occurring. And I asked about something I wanted, if I was going to get that, and they said that it is more of a probability based on how I believe if it's going to come true or not. And so they suggested that I think about what I will do if this occurred and how it will feel, and which everybody talks about, but they said it to me in a way that I understood how to bring it to fruition if I really wanted it. I spoke to Jesus, and it felt like him responding clearly in the way that I have experienced them in dreams. Very, very loving, accepting, like a very best friend. Um, and you can ask like, so what do I need to work on? Is there anything you want me to know? Is there any guidance that helps me today, that help me along with my evolution and my progress? What can I do that's fun today for me, that's full of joy or laughter? And you'll get responses. And I asked to speak to my dad, and my dad was definitely my dad. And it was insane. But then you don't know if you're making it up, because you know how your dad speaks, so you can kind of guess how he'll respond for the question. But I really can't really guess, really. I don't because the stuff I was asking him, I mean, I don't think the stuff I would have asked him in real life and I was getting a response. So with his way that he spoke, with his flair, and I only did my dad at one time, but I do my guides ever since I learned how to do it every day. And I try to see if I can do it just by asking a question and not having to do the process to see if I still get a response. I do, but it's a lot faint and I can't hear it as clear than if I do the process that she recommends. But I do feel way more connected to them. Like even if I don't do it, I can kind of distinguish what the guidance is. So I just wanted to share that, because I remember saying previously from the Monroe Institute, we learned that the guidance occurs. They can start communicating to us when we get to the fourth level of human consciousness, which is love. They meet us there. And I thought that I would have to, the more that I cleared and healed, the more I would have access to, or better, hear the guidance. But based on her technique, you can connect, and you still connecting and loving all the things that you love. Probably if you heal and clear more, the guys would probably be clearer. I don't know. But just the fact that focusing on loving all the things that you love in this life can allow for that connection good enough that you could hear the guidance, I think is amazing. So it was a different way for me of thinking about the love aspect and how long it was going to take me to connect to hear clearly. Because I thought, okay, the more that I heal is the more love that I can be filled with, and then I'll hear it more clearly, but I still have stuff to heal in order to get that connection. And from what I understood from her was if I just focus on love and all the things I love, that it would allow for that connection. And it did. So I'm really, really happy, really, really happy about it. And just wanted to share it. So I'm going to share, I'll show you the video. You can go look at the video yourself because it's an hour-long video, so I can't play it for you. You know, but I will share it. Oh, this is not what I want here. Okay, hold on. I can find it. Yes. Okay. So let me share my page. Okay, so this is the video. It is open your channel to the Divine Journey of the Master Podcast special episode. Right, this episode dives deeper into how you can access divine wisdom. So the name of the book is called You Are a Channel. She has courses and stuff like that. I also found her courses to be, I think it's cost effective. Let me see. Oh, you can't join it now. It's too late to join it now. So this is Your Channel Guide for Personal Connection with Divine Wisdom. Purchase replay for $147. I mean, that's cost effective considering the other things. So, and I really like that she allows for you having your own experience and it being very special to you. And this allows you to have connections so you can find out the best way that works for you, like your own special path. I just really love that she's cost effective. Anyway, all that to say that really what is for you and it will come to you in the best way for you. They always, the divine aspects, if you intend for something and you want to progress, they'll find a way that's best for you. But I always ask to progress in a way that's safe for me, that's best for me. Because I was looking at this, I know this happens. Looking at this other lady I look at sometimes, she's really good, and she was like, guys, just learn to enjoy the spot that you're in while also intending to progress in the best way for you. She said, some people force it and want it too fast, but it takes a while to integrate. And so she was saying, which is what I have experienced, but not everybody has that experience. But for me, the integration has been gentle and at a pace that's best for me, and not overwhelming, because she said she had a client that pushed in, and I don't know what the client did, but she ended up in a state of psychosis. So this information is a lot of information that we're integrating and understanding, and we're trying to incorporate in our daily lives. And the journey itself is beautiful and fun and love-filled and interesting and intriguing and magical, and just allow it to be that. You don't have to force anything, so be careful with that. That's what the lady was saying, which I also just know as well, just generally, that you want to go at a pace that's best for your integration, for your evolution. I do ask if it's possible to accelerate my evolution in a manner that's safe for me or that's best for me. I always put that there because I don't want to overwhelm my system. Anyway, so I'm going to play part of it.
Everybody, and welcome. One of the things I absolutely love, and I could think of many students who came to my class and said, oh, I have no interest in verbally channeling. And now they are some of the most incredible. My mind jumps in before I get the chance to receive the message. I'm reading your book, and any additional suggestions you have.
Let me see.
Hello.
This is it. Receive guidance from your soul. Sorry.
Pineal gland has tiny little cilia, hair-like extensions all around.
Hello and welcome. I have read both books and they have been so, I would feel how amazing it would be. So now you're kind of tuning into that energy. You're literally starting to direct the particles of infinite creation to align to an experience that is going to be all of that for you. And then you go beyond manifestation into what the council calls true creation. Get to go, none of that, right? Just how fun would it be to go to Africa? And then says that in the moment of realization, the past. So first, if step for me, if people outside of you are in a terrible situation or triggering you or annoying you. So first, if step for me, if people outside of you are in a terrible situation or triggering you or annoying you, stop, take some deep breaths, go from your head into your heart. Feel for the wholeness, the light within you, and put some space around yourself. Fill that space with light and take some deep breaths until you feel yourself coming back into your power. There's nothing you have to do, but be present.
I want to see if she's going to give what to do.
We are so pleased. Go up to the interview and see how she felt. And till it stops, one of the most important things, read it back to yourself. So that process you can do can create and allow more abundance in your life. Most people think it's this booming voice of God answer, like God just shows up in front of your face, or your soul just shows up in front of your face and goes, you must do that. In my experience anyway, that's not how my soul communicates with me. It's very subtle. It's very loving. And in fact, its love is absolutely unwavering. It's always there. And it's gentle. It's kind. It's sometimes soft and subtle. But when you start to tune into that, you realize that it's always there and it's always available. And you start to trust that relationship that you have with your soul. You can be in any situation. For example, I had this experience the other day. There was two ways that I could go to this place that your soul, what does my soul want me to know? And then really feel for the awareness and the guidance. And then take out a piece of paper and just write. And just write until it stops. One of the most important things. And what I've also found is,
picture this. You're sitting at home alone watching YouTube videos, wondering why you can't find the motivation to do the things you need or want to do or change in the ways you'd like. Even question from Lisa.
I was trying to get to the part where she gives the process, but I couldn't find it on the video. Sorry, guys. But it's on that video. So check it out. Sara Landon on YouTube, SaraLandon. I also think she's podcast, wherever there are podcasts. And the episode is like, let your soul guidance or receive your soul's guidance. It was like from 2 months ago. It's really a good exercise and it has worked for me, but I also bought the book. The exercise is also in the book and it has been working for me. And just as she said, like once you can start to recognize the voice, it's really there all the time. That's what I was saying. I was trying to access it without doing the process any time of day to see if I could. And I could. It just wasn't as clear as if I did the original process, but I can still hear it. I could still understand. I could I could get a response. And it just feels really good. It feels less disconnected or less like you don't know what's going on. It just, I don't know. I wish everyone could have that experience. I think it would feel so much better. So today we're going to continue with, yeah. We're actually starting the part of the book of the one woman story. Ooh. One woman's we're actually going to start the story. So I'm going to put my glasses on because today my eyes been blurry. It's not always blurry, but today definitely I woke up in a blur. It seems like it's clearing up now, but I did, but it was blurry. So let's get some reading in today. Okay, one woman's story. Life spit me out of my mother's womb in Appalachia, but not to find waiting hands, but a cold floor, as she was unattended at my birth. My mother and I shared this experience in a little clapboard house by the side of a railroad track in Pennington Gap, Virginia. My birth name was Phyllis Elizabeth Sion, originally Sion. Within months, I was thrust into another environment as my birth mother left home with me and my older brothers and sister to escape an abusive marriage and in search of her dream. She wanted to be a country singer, and so when I was a month or so old, my father was at work. She put us all on a bus and we traveled across the state to South Central Virginia, where she left us with her parents while she went to find a singing job. But as life would twist, very shortly after our arrival, grandfather's tractor pinned him underneath when he took a hill the wrong way. My older brother told me the story only a few years ago when we found each other finally. He was running alongside the tractor, so he ran to the house for help. He remembers grandmother running with her big black nurse's bag. She took out a huge hypodermic needle, which she filled with morphine for the pain. He watched her first squirt the liquid into the air and then eject it into grandfather. Then she tried to lift the tractor off him, breaking her back instead. My grandfather died underneath the tractor and grandmother never walked again. Oh my goodness. I never knew these people. I was an infant as this drama played out, left inside the house while life and death called to its side who it wanted in the moment. We were handed out in the four directions like leaves caught in a swirling wind. I wound up at a motel restaurant owned by a distant cousin, whose family frantically searched for someone to take an infant. There weren't many adoption agencies in the Tobacco Plains of Virginia in those days, and I suspect families preferred to take care of their own as best they could. And so it was, I was ultimately farmed out like the tobacco I grew up around and raised by Queen Victoria reincarnated. A staunch and severe woman, a schoolteacher who couldn't have children of her own. At this apocalyptic juncture of the fates, I was still quite shy of 1 year, and I had already earned another equally portentous name, Judy Lee Pope. Ruby Carter Pope loved me dearly. There is no doubt of that. Her life, and therefore the life of her husband, who became my father, centered around her church, her family, her school children, and the construction of me. But her God was a fearsome and jealous thing I couldn't tolerate. And as soon as I got old enough to question, which in my instance was quite young, we came to loggerheads. I grew up without I grew up almost totally without playmates, wandering the tobacco fields of the Piedmont region of Virginia with a Saint Bernard dog and a borrowed horse. She sewed many of my clothes from flour sacks and never did anything herself but work and sacrifice. These were my models. Oh, and judgment. They do a lot of judging in the country, in the country of Virginia. We were very poor, though measured against the poverty of Brunswick County, Virginia, we were middle class, I suspect. My father ran a country store that essentially served the abysmally poor Black families that lived around us. I remember one barefoot woman who came in daily. She wore one single stocking over her head and ate one can of sardines and an orange soda every day. It never occurred to me that this was probably all she had to eat, and it never occurred to me then either that she never paid. Dad wrote up little pieces of paper that represented bills. He died when I was 18, and I found boxes of these unpaid bills totaling over 20,000, which was a staggering amount of money to be owed in those days. He must have fed half of Rawlings, Virginia, and simply never told anyone. I grew up being schooled in the fork of a pear tree. My teachers were a voice in the wind and whispers in the forest. I fashioned a bow and arrows myself, and when the horse across the field was offered to ride, I left home for hours every day to find something. I don't know what. I never had riding lessons. The horse taught me. The saddle and bridle anyone could figure out. And when the saddle slid beneath me with me in it on my first attempt, I had a little talk with him about letting the air out of his stomach before I cinched the saddle. I had to have this little talk with him often, but it worked. And when his ears pricked up one day when he saw a fallen tree in the field, I knew what he wanted. He wanted to fly. And so we flew over it. I leaned into him. It was the logical thing to do. He jumped to the tree. I just got to fly along with him. After that, there was nothing that stopped us. We forded rivers and trotted right down the middle of creeks. We wandered for miles through dense forests and galloped over fields and meadows. And if anything got in our way, we jumped it. No one ever knew where I went on this horse. You could travel for days and not see another human being if you knew where to go through the forests and back roads of Brunswick County then. I lied to my mother, of course. She wouldn't have allowed me to leave the yard, but for well-crafted lies that became a necessity of life very early. She objected to everything and anything. To her, almost everything in life was either sinful or dangerous. I never went to a birthday party or slept over at a girlfriend's house. No one ever slept over at my house. There were fantasies other people lived. These were fantasies other people lived on the television. I had no idea people really lived like that. My adopted mother chose my clothes and told me what to wear every day to school, even when I was much older. If I put on a sleeveless dress in June, she said I would get cold, and she added layers. If I put on a sweater in January, she told me I'd be too hot and dressed me down. The ultimate effect of this control was that I didn't have any idea what I felt or what I wanted. I wasn't allowed to date until I was 17, and she sat stony-faced at the window watching for me to come home even then, so she could approve my appearance when I returned to make sure I hadn't discovered anything sinful, I'm sure. Once my date walked me to the door with his shirt not properly tucked in, I was never allowed to date him again. I think I was still in love with him a decade later when we met and released each other from this fantasy we each had held in our own way for all those years, simply because we had never been allowed our time. My father and mother slept in separate double beds in one room. I slept with my mother until I left for college. My grandmother had the other bedroom. Ruby refused, heralding a variety of excuses, to ever finish the room upstairs. Thusly, she even managed to control how I slept at night. And she managed to never have to sleep with my father. Quit fidgeting, she used to say when I turned too often. Lie still. Summers were endless, drenched in suspensions of tepid, stagnant pools of humidity. I lay for hours on end, too hot to sleep, not allowed to move, only my mind free to move about. Winters I lay weighted under piles of ancient quilts, unmoving then due to the oppressions of stiff blankets from the Civil War, holding me in their spell, haunting me with their visions, yet still cold in the depths of Virginia winter. But I had my music and dance, and I had the forest, which instructed me to dance on her naked skin barefoot until I could waltz across the forest floor without making a sound. I had a borrowed horse, a beloved St. Bernard named Mickey, a teacher in a pear tree, a little friend in the jack in the pulpit plant, and another in the pink lady slipper. These were my childhood advisors. There is one lesson I will never forget, and now I watch it come to pass as a prophecy in my own life. From my memory, it was my first lesson delivered in the fork of that pear tree, where I wedged myself daily for years, dialoguing with what I called words without a voice. I was told that about every possible life experience would come to me so that I would ultimately understand and have compassion for the human experience. And I was told that someday, when I was full of these life experiences, my voice would travel around the world sharing what I had learned, and that what I had to say would have a tremendous impact. But only when I really didn't care about such influence. I was also told that there was another part of me out there somewhere, and that someday I would meet the mate of my being, and that our work would be together, and that I wouldn't get up in the morning and go to a job like other people. I was told that he was part of my soul, and that our work together would have a vast and beneficial influence on the world. This is essentially what I care to share of what I remember. And there is one other early awareness that I distinctly remember. I knew that the secrets of the universe lay in the physical experience possible between a man and a woman when they truly loved each other. I knew that love was the greatest gift you could be given. I knew there was a place you could go, a road only opened through the gateway of physicality that few have ever walked. And I knew that this was why the church shamed sexuality and why governments had such rules and regulations to govern what they called marriage, and why the whole subject had been both tabooed and regulated throughout this age of civilization. I suspected the serpent was an evil, and I knew that Eve must have been brilliant to want more knowledge. And I knew it was illogical for the loving God who had created us to not want us to know everything. I suspected if there were such a beast as the devil, the smartest place for him to hide would be in the church. I knew the deepest secrets had to do with love, with what I now called sacred relationship. I knew that my purpose was somehow tied to reintegration of these secrets. I also knew that there was another part of me out there somewhere, and I began a lifetime search for him. I thought I saw him once, his face pressed against a window of a bus that slowly passed us on Route 1 on the way to Petersburg. For a moment, the bus and our car traveled at the same speed and our eyes met. We linked in that brief moment at some place that was holy, though we were only maybe, I don't know, 8, 9, or 10 years old. It would be another 40 years before I touched such a holy place with a man again. I knew he played guitar and wrote songs and had the voice of an angel. I always thought I'd know his voice if I ever heard it. But doesn't it sound intriguing? I love it. In terms of what shaped me, I can look back and remember the incidents that made me question the veracity of what was presented as authority. In the church I was forced to attend, I heard preaching on Sunday about love and non-judgment. I heard preaching about how God didn't care what you wore, but only saw what was in your heart. But I frequently overheard parishioners and the preacher criticizing and demeaning each other before they even got out of the door. Can you believe she wears that to church? My young ears heard when my logic knew that was all the poor woman in question had to wear. I could see hearts then, and I saw purity in that old woman, but they only saw clothing. Well, you know where she comes from, don't you? I wouldn't expect much out of her. Her family is trash. I couldn't understand blaming someone for the actions of their parents or their distant cousins. And I remember hearing, always be good to your family. They're all you've ever got. And always remember that blood is thicker than water. That's a funny thing to say to an adopted child who had no blood around. I simply never believed what I was told by the humans around me. And there were extraordinary events that made me look elsewhere for answers. I don't remember how old I was, maybe 8 or 9. I had just gotten into bed one summer night. My mother was grading papers and my father was reading. I distinctly remember pulling a single sheet up to my chin when a glow appeared in the room. It transcended darkness, creating an unmistakable luminescence, a pregnant wetness that made the very air seem visible, like floating molecules of moist light. A fear rose in me that was incalculable, beyond my wildest imagination. I had no backdrop for mystical experience, though I am sure now that this is what it was. 3 lights appeared in the room, one on either side of the bed, and one in the very center at the foot of the bed. A form appeared below the center light, and it seemed to rock, though now I understand that was possibly a pulsation. I was frozen, completely unable to move, which exasperated my fear. I told myself that if I could only move one digit of a finger, I could break this terrible spell. And so I focused all my energy on moving one finger. It was impossible. So when I tried to focus all my will on my throat to scream for help, I could make no sound. I thought I would surely die there, frozen to the spot. My father came down the hallway toward the bedroom, and I knew that if he came into the room, he would break the spell. And I sent him every thought I could muster to please enter the room. But he stopped at the door as if he'd forgotten something, and he turned around and never entered. I knew the lights, whatever they were, had planted a thought to change his mind, and I knew I was dead. I didn't know how long this otherworldly spell lasted, but slowly the lights on the side dimmed. The pulsing of the center figure slowed in direct relation to the dimming lights. The lights on either side disappeared at the same time, blip, and I was now transfixed by only the central light above the rocking figure. Imperceptibly, slowly, the rocking slowed, in direct proportion to the light slowly extinguishing. Finally, I was held only by the unmoving apparition, a formless form underneath a single dim light. As immediately as it had begun, simultaneously the figure disappeared, the light left, and I was free to bolt out of the bedroom and tear down the hall. I threw myself into a chair hanging on for dear life, and I told my mother what had happened. I refused to go back to bed, though eventually exhaustion won out. In the morning, we received a phone call from an aunt to say that her aged mother-in-law had died at precisely the same time as my incident occurred. And so it was that it became legend in my family that great aunt somebody or other had visited me when she passed. My only memory of her was of her sitting in a rocking chair, slowly rocking back and forth. And perhaps it was she, though I prefer Metatron's explanation. He says it was an initiation from 3 masters from other dimensions, and that it could only be given after I had finally decided to stay in a body. Though that decision, if Metatron is right, has been questioned many times before, many times since. I suppose that because Ruby had not allowed ordinary life to touch me in so many years, I rushed headlong into it when my father died, and I left for college at 18. I clearly began to have those life experiences the voice spoke to me about. I fell in and out of love like children learning to walk, fall down. I was desperate for love. Desperate to be touched, desperate for passion. The love toddler landed safely on her bottom until one night when a date refused to take me home. I remember the feeling of fright when he drove past my street and instead turned down a dark road towards his own apartment building. His intentions were made clear when he used a martial arts grip on my arm, forcing me inside his apartment. When he turned his back inside, I bolted, running for my life. He took chase. As I ran, I had to make a choice between staying in the shadows or trying to make a phone call. The phone booth lay in light, clearly visible to anyone chasing a frightened young girl. I chose the lighted phone booth, hoping that I could make an emergency call before he spotted me. But when I got to it, the phone was broken and he had spotted me. I then ran toward the beach, sinking deeply into the sand with each stride and exhausting myself trying to run through the marsh grass and sand dunes. But I got away. After walking several miles along the beach, I saw figures approaching in the dim moonlight, and I panicked and took back to the roadside to cover the last 4 or so miles home. It was now the middle of the night, closer to dawn than night. It had been a long night of escape and terror. A car pulled alongside me and a voice said, "You must be crazy walking out here in the middle of the night. What's wrong? Let me give you a lift home. You're not safe out here walking like this." I peered in to see a safe enough looking face, one I had never seen before. I must have been crazy because I got in the car. He immediately sped up to a pace that left no possibility of jumping and pulled out a blade that gleamed in the moonlight, leveling it sideways at my throat. He drove somewhere deep into the dismal swamp as far as the road went then. The rest of that night and into the morning, a blur of blood and contusions and struggling with moonlight sharding off a knife blade. After the battle was over, he drove me back to the very street I had tried so hard to get to that night and dropped me on the corner. I wore a fencing mask for weeks, ashamed somehow of my cuts and bruises, as if a girl trying so hard to get home had done something to deserve the terror of that night. I ultimately went to the police, but at the time, Virginia Beach had a policy of printing all rape victims' names in the local paper, and I knew Queen Victoria would hear what had happened, and I just wasn't ready for what that would create in my life. The thought of her accusations, of her screams of sin and guilt were more oppressive, more terrifying than anything that had happened to me that night. I closed the door and went on with my life with a passion. I went to work at a radio station, moved into a phase of success in media and communication that was to continue through all the emotional turmoil of the next 30 years. I met a handsome young man and we began to date, getting more and more serious. He asked me to marry him. I was thinking about it, though there were signs I was ignoring, things about him and other issues with me. I had been having problems with my period, but nothing else seemed wrong. So I ignored these sporadic appearances and continued my life. Finally, I sought help. Initially, I was told I had a tumor. Then I was told I was 7 months pregnant. But this was not in my life plan. I suppose because I had not enjoyed my own childhood, I had no intention of ever having children of my own. Children, from what I had seen around me growing up, are what kept women from having a life. I viewed women as trapped in an endless cycle of sacrifice, not to mention that I was scared to death of the shame and the pain. I married the handsome young man and spent a terrifying night giving birth to a girl. I was told. Perhaps it seemed the only solution at the time. My doctor had arranged a private adoption and I never saw her. It was the best choice I felt I could make under the circumstances. I had no money at all and I felt she would be better off with a family that could afford to raise her. I suppose my own childhood of flour sack clothes and few opportunities was still too fresh in my mind. And it was the only way to keep Queen Victoria from knowing and avoid sinking the illustrious and noble but poor Southern family into shame. I hid the last 2 months of the pregnancy, never leaving the apartment. I had learned at a very young age to draw the shades on things that were not supposed to be seen, and I had become that. My handsome young husband turned out to be gay, and though he loved me as much as a gay man can love a woman, I was, after all, still a woman. Through all of this, I had managed to work my way through college in music, drama, and philosophy. I had stumbled into a radio as a DJ when women were first allowed that joy, and from there I discovered the power of advertising. I moved into one of the most creative ad agencies in North America and worked my way into a position of authority and respect at a very young age. In what was still a man's world a man's world there as well. I won awards and honors and was highly paid. I had a magic touch that translated into high profits for my clients, and I loved what I did. I lived what was, I suppose, a dual life. My days filled with producing television commercials, planning campaigns, writing radio jingles, buying media, negotiating with clients and reps. My terrain ranged from the boardroom to the studio. I was a rare duck, equally adept at the creative end and the business end. And, I almost seemed to possess a psychic ability in advertising. Once I knew the soul of a client, I could see how the business or product or image flowed out of who he or she was, and could just as easily see what ingredients were needed to position the image or message. Then I could write and design the piece, whether it was print, something scared me, print or audio or video. And much to my surprise, I could just as easily sense the budget and skew it where it belonged, holding huge traffic patterns of media in my mind. I thrilled at filling the mental crossword puzzles where the demographics of listeners, viewers, readers cross-match certain words in a spot for visual designed to reach a certain segment of a market, thus assuring sales. But my nights were not as successful. We lived good together and we had bought a home that was way over our heads, as all young yuppies are expected to do. It was a Spanish mansion with a hand-painted tile fireplace and picture frame molding. There was a fountain in the backyard, a marble foyer that ran about 40 feet long to the foot of a staircase that could easily have been the scene for Gone with the Wind. I even boasted a servant staircase. Of course, we had no servants, and our nights were spent trying to clean the alternating black and white marble tiles in the front foyer. The roof leaked and sadly needed replacing, and the kitchen had never been brought up to the 19th century, much less the 20th century. The illusion was great, but you couldn't cook there. And so after working all day, I worked alongside my husband to renovate this ancient mansion at night. We had lots of parties. He loved parties. And I always worried about who he'd fall in love with before the night was over. His depression seemed to get worse when he was drinking. And I knew our marriage was as much of an illusion as the Spanish mansion. But you never know what will break the camel's back. One morning on the way to work, I skipped along the sidewalk toward my car, trying to admire my dark green Buick Electra. It looked good in the sunlight, and clients liked it, though my heart ached for my old MG. A construction worker sat forlornly on the curb by the fender of my car. I ignored him as I stepped to the other side of the car and jumped back in shock. The driver's side had been sliced open, as if a giant had mistaken it as a can of green peas. I stood there gawking, my jaw hanging against my chest. The construction worker stood up, hard hat in hand over his chest, as if in respect for my now deceased vehicle. My demolition crane was on the way to a job, and when we took the corner, it just jumped off the truck and did that to your car. We had the knife on it instead of the ball. They left me behind to wait for the owner to show up. I don't know why I cracked at that moment, but it was at that precise moment that I decided I needed to make a change. I managed to get to work only to be called into the president's office. He announced that he was leaving advertising and closing the business that month. I had been there 5 years and I loved my job. I was a writer and a creator. I produced radio and television commercials and planned campaigns and managed huge budgets for clients. These people were more family than I had ever known. I had just been given up for adoption again. When I got home that night and my husband was no emotional where to be found, preferring liquor and a few ice cubes, I snapped. Women keep score retroactively. Men erase their bad marks at the end of the day. So I was at 5 years and not much rope left. This was the 3 millionth time he hadn't been there for me. He figured he hadn't done anything wrong yet that day. Besides, he'd always gotten away with it before. When he drank, he always threatened suicide, and I always hid the keys to his car and pleaded earnestly for him to come to his senses, which usually meant staying up all night negotiating deep passages of his inner turmoil, after which he usually celebrated by cleaning the marble tiles or stripping furniture. But it had been a bad day, and that night I was a new woman. This time I threw the keys at him, suggested he take a long drive, preferably off a short pier, packed my suitcase, and walked out the door. I left him the Spanish mansion on the lake, the antique furniture, the statue of David, and a slightly damaged Buick Electra. Luckily, I had built a good reputation in advertising and was quickly offered a job in television. The day I signed my contract at the TV station, management walked out, leaving me the only person on staff at a management level. And so it was that I ran a television station for a year. I had stumbled into radio on bluff and bravado and gained a tremendous education, Spent 5 years in an award-winning ad agency, and now fate had rounded out my resume quite nicely. Fate had a few other surprises in store for me in my personal life as well. I went to a Unitarian cocktail party and saw the most handsome man I had ever seen across the room. Judging him to probably be equally egotistical and no longer trusting very handsome men, I spent the night crossing the room in the opposite direction he went, determined not to run into him. I survived the party without encounter and joined a group for dinner, only to find myself seated right across from him. In the end, I took him home and ultimately we married. We were deeply comfortable together, he and I. He was an intellectual with a great sense of humor, deeply wounded from his childhood, but who isn't? I didn't understand the drivers implanted from my childhood, and I had already fully embarked on my you need to be more giving, smarter, prettier, sexier, nicer, funnier, and more talented than anyone around you to be equal and deserve life phase. That translates to a woman headed for being superwoman and to a potential victim. I subbed at a late night radio show. I subbed for a late night radio talk show host on occasion as well during those days. And I remember an incident that foretold a lot about which took another 20 years to finally make sense. The regular talk show host was a conservative, and needless to say, I considered myself a liberal. I received great joy in what I considered opening the minds of his listeners when I did his show. On one particular night, I chose to talk about a very controversial legal situation. It was a court case in a nearby state in which a Black woman had been jailed as an accomplice to a burglary. Her boyfriend had stolen something while she was riding in the car. During the night, her white jailer entered her cell and raped her. During the rape, she managed to grab a knife from his belt, stabbed him, and ran. He died. His semen splayed on the walls and his pants around his knees. She fled to another state fearing Southern justice, and an extradition process was begun to bring her back to face murder charges. Feminists were appalled, rednecks wanted blood. I merely brought the circumstances to the attention of my listeners that evening, representing both sides of the argument, though I admit my obvious bias towards what I considered to be an enlightened and compassionate point of view. I interviewed a local judge regarding the legal issues and also interviewed area feminists to get the argument on the woman's behalf. When the show was over, I switched the FM to automatic as I did every night, checked the logs, and closed down the station. I exited the side door, shutting the light off behind me. I was alone in the station, as always at that hour. I walked out into the huge parking lot to find a row of cars down one side of the parking lot, another row of cars down the other side of the lot, and a row of police cars down the middle, holding them apart from one another. The cars on the right were there to hurt me. The cars on the left were there to defend me. And the police were there to keep order. I slammed to my car and drove home and sobbed all night. How could anyone have been angry at the truth? How could they hate me so? I was only shedding light on the dark truth. Why didn't people want to know the whole story? It was a crisis point in my Southern life, a life where a woman is not supposed to offend or question. By dawn, I had come to the realization that essentially I had a power which I hadn't wanted and didn't know what to do with. Sorry. People, I sadly realized, either really, really liked me or really, really disliked me. There was, for whatever reason, no middle ground. This incident pointed this out regarding my speaking voice. I was later to realize I had the same effect on people with my writing and even my sheer presence. that night and for many years to come. It brought me great pain to imagine having such a presence. I was frightened by power and wanted nothing to do with it. I much preferred to be loved by all, seeking only approval. It was years later, and many more tearful nights before I came to respect and accept this particular power as something to own, something to use to make a difference. It would be decades before I realized that people who make a difference usually offend someone. People pleasers seldom trigger change. Okay, I'm going to stop there for today. But it's getting good, isn't it? I don't think this section has no chapters, really. It's just reading. Okay. But isn't it interesting? I like this part of the book because we get to see a real life account. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys have a great day. I hope when I mentioned help someone, let me know if you get to connect and what your guidance says. Is it correct? Is it better, easier? Does everything flow easier? Is it more effortless? Maybe you don't want it to be that, but is it better for you? Are you enjoying it better then? Anyways, hope you have a great day. I hope you know you are loved, that you're gentle with yourself, that you take time with yourself, and that you try to enjoy this life as best you could. Okay. Bye, guys.